Good morning again. Bob is off today. On Friday, $85 billion in across-the-board spending cuts are scheduled to begin taking effect, part of $1 trillion in spending cuts over the next 10 years. Nearly half of the cuts will be to defense. The Pentagon says that 800,000 civilian employees could face furloughs. Cuts to airport security funding could cause flight delays of up to 90 minutes. And everyone in the federal government, from FBI agents to meat inspectors to emergency responders, could face furloughs. Education funding and Head Start could also be especially hard hit. And we start off this morning with Education Secretary Arne Duncan. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Major. Thanks for having me.
I know you're going to get to some of the implications of these across-the-board spending cuts, but Mr. Secretary, I must ask you, in the Recovery Act, the Education Department received $98 billion, and there were discretionary budget increases the President won when Democrats controlled Congress. Isn't there room in your budget, Mr. Secretary, to absorb some of these spending cuts and not have some of the negative effects that have been advertised so far?
Well, our money all goes out to school districts, and as you know, the vast majority of federal money goes to help vulnerable children. So whether it's children with special needs, whether it's poor children, whether it's adults in college who are doing work-study programs, whether it's our babies that you talked about in Head Start. We don't have any ability with dumb cuts like this to figure out what the right thing to do is. It just means a lot more children will not get the kinds of services and opportunities they need, and as many as 40,000 teachers could lose their jobs.
How soon could that happen, the 40,000? Because I've read differing accounts. It could be immediate, it could be until the fall. Well, is there a sky is falling aspect to any of the things you're talking about?
Well, some of the stuff happens earlier, some of the stuff happens this fall, but what it does, it creates tremendous instability. And there are literally teachers now who are getting pink slips, who are getting notices they can't come back this fall. We need to invest in education. We need to educate our way to a better economy. Anytime we have fewer children in Head Start, fewer poor children, fewer children with special needs getting the services they need, none of that's good for children or families or ultimately for the country.
And there's nothing you can do within your own budget, Mr. Secretary, to prioritize, to shield or buffer these programs that you deem essential from these cuts.
Sequester gives us no ability. It's just across the board dumb cuts. And we're willing to make tough calls and make tough decisions.
Such as?
Such as we cut out $68 billion in taxpayer money that was going to subsidize bankers with our student loan program. We took that $68 billion, put about 28 to reduce the deficit, 40 billion to increase Pell Grants. We've gone from 6 million Pell recipients to 9 million Pell recipients without going back to taxpayers for a nickel. That's a smart cut. That's us trying to show some creativity. And it's interesting that folks on the other side fought that decision.
You mentioned pink slips a moment ago. Who's sending them out? The states because they're hearing from you, or you're...
No, this is local school districts trying to manage it. Obviously, I was a superintendent, a CEO in Chicago for 7.5 years, and this is the spring. You're trying to plan your budget for the fall. And with this much instability, this much chaos coming from Washington, again, the fact that this is so easily avoidable is why I'm so angry. If folks would just work together, compromise, find a middle ground, we wouldn't put districts and families and children through this much trauma. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
But the White House did concede earlier this week, and I know this is a debate the White House doesn't like to get into, but the idea for these across-the-board spending cuts did originate with the White House. Do you think that the administration now regrets that idea in the very first place?
I think sequester was set up to be so painful for everybody, recognizing the dysfunction of Congress to be so painful that it would force people to come to the table. And the fact that people in Congress are so tone deaf to what's really going on in their districts and what would really happen, that to me is just like, it's unimaginable. We don't have to be in this situation. This is not rocket science. We could solve this tomorrow if folks had the will to compromise, to come to the table and do the right thing for children and to try and keep growing the middle class. That's what I think we all want to do.
You know, there's a countdown phenomena building up around this story. But do you think there's any possibility, and there was some discussion of this in the morning papers, that come March 2nd, if the sequester, the across-the-board spending cuts actually happen, nothing really terrible will occur, and voters will say, wait a minute, this seems like it was all exaggerated.
In education, again, it's not just March 2nd, and what happens in March and April and May and June and then going back to school this fall. And if we have 70,000 less children in Head Start, if we have tens of thousands of poor children and children with disabilities not getting the services they need, the children of military families get disproportionately impacted because we fund a lot of impact aid. So families where the parents are serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, all of a sudden those children get a worse education? That's not right, Major. That's not fair. Doesn't make sense.
Mr. Secretary, you saw in our open, we're also going to have another conversation later on this show about gun control. You came from an urban school district. Chicago has been tragically, horribly in the headlines of late. What's your take on the arc of the gun control debate right now, and how does it affect you personally?
Well, Thursday, the Vice President and I spent a couple hours in Connecticut with the families of children who were killed in the Sandy Hook massacre. We spent time with families from the Bridgeport community. And that's where I think we should be spending our time, is talking about how we reduce gun violence. That's the productive use of our time. Spending time talking about stupid issues like this in Congress doesn't make sense. We have to create a climate in which our children can grow up free of fear. We need a lot fewer children being killed, and we need a lot fewer children worrying every single day, am I going to be safe? And whether it's South Side of Chicago or Sandy Hook or Arizona or Colorado, our children deserve something better.
Mr. Secretary, it's been great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for the
I
opportunity.
appreciate it very much.